All right, we're going to finish up the rest of practice test 2 for Common Assessment 2, number 12 and number 13. As different as they look, they are very similar. Okay, so we're going to follow pretty much the same protocol that we did for number 10 and number 11. So if you remember number 10 and number 11, 12 and 13 are very, very similar. And I'm going to jump right in with number 12. And we have an interesting equation. We have a group to the third power, and there's something crazy going on because there's all these things. What's going to happen? Well, first of all, how is this similar to number 10 and number 11? Well, we have a grouping symbol. That's how it's similar. And what did we do with number 10 and number 11? The first thing we did was isolate the grouping symbol. So we're going to do it again. We're going to isolate the grouping symbol. All right, so in this case, for number 12, to isolate the grouping symbol, here's our grouping symbol, we have to get rid of that minus 2. How do we get rid of a minus 2? With a plus 2. So we're going to add 2 on both sides. Okay, so remember, this is the first step. We undo the grouping symbol. And we'll be left with x minus 6 to the third power equaling 27. Now our grouping symbol is isolated. That's what we wanted. That's what we have. But now what? We have this situation. We have this thing to the third power. So what do we do? Well, similar to 10 and 11, where once our grouping symbol was isolated, we undid it. We had to undo absolute value. Well, now our grouping symbol is isolated again. Guess what? We can undo it. So how in the world do we undo something to the third power? And that's what we have to remember. We have to recall this from notes and beginning of the year and just how operations work. So how do you undo something to the third power? You take the cubed root. You take the cubed root. You ask, what times itself 3 times gives you this? So we're going to undo to the third power. And this is what it looks like. If we undo the left-hand side to the third power, we're taking this exponent of 3, we're taking this index of 3, and we're canceling everything. And so what we'll have is simply x minus 6. We will have undone the operation to the third power. Okay, so that's what happens on the left-hand side. But as you know from basic equations, if you do something to the left-hand side, you must do something to the right-hand side. So we have to take the cubed root of 27. So now we have to deal with, well, what is the cubed root of 27? Well, let's remember what the cubed root means. So the cubed root means this. If 1 times 1 times 1 is equal to 1, then the cubed root of 1 is 1. If 2 times 2 times 2 is equal to 8, then the cubed root of 8 is 2, because the cubed root is asking what times itself 3 times gives me that number. So now we have to think, well, what times itself 3 times gives us 27? Lo and behold, 3. How do we know? 3 times 3 times 3 is equal to 27, so the cubed root of 27 is equal to 3. Okay, so that's how we know what the cubed root is. So we've undone the cubed root, and this is what we have. From here out, it's as simple as pie. We isolate the variable, undo minus 6 with a plus 6, and we are set to go. X is equal to 9. Okay, and then we have solved our equation. You can do a mental check. Plug 9 in for x, right? 9 minus 6 is 3. 3 to the third power is 27. 27 minus 2 is 25. Check. So there is our solution. In this case, only one solution. And that's how we work out number 12. So now on to 13. And this will round out Common Assessment 2. 13 is very similar to 10, 11, and 12. How? Because the square root symbol is also a grouping symbol. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to isolate the grouping symbol. And that's the first step. Isolate the grouping symbol. Okay, so what's happening with this grouping symbol? If we see our grouping symbol is here, the square root, what's happening to it? There's a 5 out there. What's that 5 doing? The 5 is multiplying. So if we're going to isolate the grouping symbol, we're going to undo that 5. And we undo multiplication with division. So we're going to divide both sides by 5. And what will we have left? We will have left our grouping symbol. On the right-hand side, 35 divided by 5 is 7. Okay, so we have undone our grouping symbol. And now we have isolated our grouping symbol. Now the goal is to undo the grouping symbol. So we have to undo a square root. And how do we undo a square root? By raising both sides to the second power. Okay, so we have to raise both sides to the second power. That will undo a square root. Okay, so here's what we do. We have to raise this side to the second power. And what will happen? Well, we have a square root and an exponent of 2 that cancels out. And we are left with x plus 12. So that's what would happen. It cancels out. On the right-hand side, well, we have to do the same thing. If we raise the left-hand side to the second power, we have to raise the right-hand side to the second power. And so we have 7 to the second power is 49, and the rest is cake. Okay, so we have to be careful with our operations and how they are undone. So now we isolate the x by subtracting 12 on both sides, and x will be equal to 37. Okay, so there is our solution. If you want to do a mental check, plug 37 in for x. 37 plus 12 is 49. The square root of 49 is 7. 7 times 5 is 35. It checks out. So our solution is x equals 37. Just remember, it's the same process we've done for number 10, 11, 12, and 13. Isolate the grouping symbol and then undo it. If it's absolute value, case 1, case 2. If it's square root, take the second power. If it's squared, take the square root. If it's cubed, take the cube root, etc., etc. And that is it for Common Assessment 2.